Thank you for being with us. I am House Minority Leader Lisa Dameth, and I represent District 13A. We are here today to talk about the public safety and judiciary bill that was posted this morning at 2:32 a.m. I want to tell you that this bill is actually what bad legislating looks like. As you know, the Democrats have full control, but a very slim margin. And by leaving us out, not offering us a spot as a conferee spot on this conference committee, the Democrats have actually shut out the voice of 48% geographically of Minnesota. But the Republicans here at the Capitol are ready to talk about some of the most concerning things. As we have moved forward in looking at the conference committee, the Democrats have codified the word carjacking, but they refuse to increase any penalties for it. They've dropped a bipartisan provision that required mandatory minimums for criminals who use firearms to commit violent felonies. And this is what happens when you have a majority that believes they do not have to listen to Minnesotans and shut out the voices of Republicans in that conference committee. I'm going to be letting my colleagues, Representative Niska and Representative Scott, talk a little bit more in detail about one of the things that we have the most concern about. And that has to deal with our state's human rights statute. The DFL brought forward a change to the human rights statute that removed very specific language stating that sexual orientation does not include a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. House Republicans brought an amendment back to that language, and it passed 126-0 off the House floor to change that. In her comments, Chair Becker-Finn said quite clearly that this has never been a protected class and should never be a protected class, and encouraged everyone to vote yes, which they did. We all did, 126-0. So it was an incredibly big surprise to us when this language that we had agreed on just a short time ago was removed from the conference committee. And the Democrats proceeded to close up the bill despite our concerns and our objections. There has been more conversation going on about this, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Peggy Scott to give a little bit more information on this.
Good morning, Representative Peggy Scott, 31B. Thank you for being here. Yes, we are very troubled that this language that was bipartisanly and unanimously supported on the House floor was removed and replaced with some very vague language. Representative Becker-Finn and the Democrats that evening said we always want to protect kids, but it doesn't appear by their actions that that's what they're trying to do. If you really want to protect kids, then don't remove language like this, or at the very least, work with the author of the amendment to get language that works in the Human Rights Act. If you want to protect kids, forgive the public for a minute here when they see the actions of the Democrat Party not doing that, a track record of not protecting children, a track record this very session of allowing children from other states to come here unaccompanied by their parents to receive gender-affirming care, which can be life-altering. The fact that they made this a sanctuary state for abortion, so children from minor girls from other states could come here without their parents' knowledge or blessing or support to come and get a life-changing, potentially life-changing procedure called an abortion. In the past, they've introduced legislation for comprehensive sex education starting at the preschool level. We don't see that as protecting children. So if you want to say that you're protecting children, then put your money where your mouth is. And let the public, forgive the public for not exactly believing that what you're doing is protecting children. That's what we're here to do. And I would like to turn it over to Harry Niska now.
Thank you. My name is Representative Harry Niska. I'm from District 31A, which is the city of Ramsey and part of Andover. And I'm a career attorney. I've been, my professional experience has been writing, analyzing, and arguing about the meaning of legal documents. And this judiciary and omnibus and public safety omnibus bill that came out at 2:30 in the morning, 500 pages worth, is really a good example of why the DFL trifecta has proven themselves to be irresponsible and untrustworthy in driving the public policy in our state. What's responsible as a legislator or as someone writing a legal document is to look at every possible interpretation, misinterpretation, or argument that could be made and make sure that what you're writing means what you think it says and doesn't mean what you worry someone might say it does. We've seen many cases in which legislation that we pass today turns out in a court case down the road to have a meaning that we as the legislators, whether here in Minnesota or in Congress, didn't realize they were, because someone makes an argument in a court case and a judge accepts that argument in a future court case. And so I am very concerned, as all of our colleagues are here, that the amendments that the DFL is pushing, that the Walz administration and DFL leadership is pushing to the Minnesota Human Rights Act will open the door in the future to someone making novel arguments about that advocating for legal rights for pedophiles under the Minnesota Human Rights Act. We expect those arguments will be made. Nobody here agrees with those arguments. I do not agree with those arguments. I hope that my DFL colleagues don't agree with those arguments, but whether we in the legislature agree with those arguments is not what matters. What matters is what a court decides down the road. And we should not put ideological blinders on. We should not ignore the possible implications of our legislation because we're concerned about pushing one ideological agenda. We have to be responsible, and when an all-DFL conference committee does irresponsible things like what they're doing with these Minnesota Human Rights Act amendments, we should be very concerned. It was, as Representative Scott said, this was an amendment, and Leader Damath, this was an amendment that I offered on the floor. We got 126-0 vote. A bipartisan vote, and then in a conference committee where none of us were told that this is what was going to happen, it was dropped. So that raises serious questions about why that is, and it should raise serious questions to the people of Minnesota about whether the DFL trifecta can be trusted with the power that they have. There's another provision in this bill as well that received a lot of attention on the House floor and in the at least in the national media, less so in the local media. But the way that this has come out of the conference committee report is very concerning as well, and that's the speech registry provision that this bill funds at the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. It was requested in the Minnesota Department of Human Rights budget that they get $395,000 and then $250,000 every year for a database upgrades at their and staff to track what they call hate incidents, but which include, as was made clear in the House debate, would include political opinions that somebody doesn't like. The Commissioner of Human Rights has now said, and she said in a meeting with me and Representative Scott, that they don't want to have that kind of a database, that they don't believe that that kind of a database is a good idea, that the questions that we asked were, in her words, spot on. And yet, the conference committee report that came out, again, at 2:33 in the morning, gives all of the funding for this speech database and includes very vague attempt to rebrand. I think it's really a fake fix of this problem. They rebrand instead of a hate database to analyzing civil rights trends, which, again, we're giving the same amount of money to the Department of Human Rights. The Department of Human Rights previously asked for in order to have a database to track political speech. And if it is the case that the Commissioner of Human Rights is now backing off of the position that they've advocated for years, then we as a legislature shouldn't be funding that and giving the Commissioner of Human Rights a blank check. And so that's, again, an example of the kind of reckless legislating that we're having. They're trying to jam through all of this legislation very quickly, and the people of Minnesota should be very concerned, and we as a Republican caucus are very concerned. We'll take questions.
I'm wondering if you have a sense of how long or how intense of a debate you're going to provide this evening or tomorrow morning, depending when the bill reaches the floor?
There are a number of us who feel pretty seriously about this. I think that it would be a good idea for the DFL to bring this back to conference committee and fix these problems. And I think that we're going to make that case to the people of Minnesota on the House floor whenever it comes up.
Do you have objections to other things in the public safety bill?
In the 530 pages, yeah, there are other objectionable pieces of it for sure. Yeah, I think we're at like 11 hours since the 533 page or 533 page bill was dropped. So yeah, there are some other concerns. These are a few that we wanted to highlight this morning.
Well, we're obviously concerned about some of the firearms bills that were in there, but we expected that. Some of the things that have come out that we didn't expect is some changing of money from training for law enforcement officers. Some of the money, I did not expect the reduction in mandatory minimums for carrying of a gun or use of a gun in violent crime to be included, which, when you think about it, that goes against everything that they say they want to do, and they want to reduce gun violence. And we're going to, at the same time, reduce the minimums that, well, for all intents and purposes, judges are ignoring that anyway. Now we're just making it easier for judges to give minimum or no sentences for the use of firearms in a crime. Though that's just the list of, it goes on, and we could talk about that for a long time, but those two things really pop out to me.
Representative Novotny, the sentences for gun crimes, is that there's actually like a reduction in the minimum, or is that keeping the judge's discretion? I know the Senate had amended, making mandatory minimums for crimes that used a gun in the commission of that
Well, there
crime.
already is, and keep in mind that that was not heard in the House. That was a Senate provision that we have not looked at.
Okay, but
So-
you're saying that there's a separate provision in this bill that reduces the minimums for those gun crimes?
So the hate incident database, or whatever the label is for it now, do you actually perceive they'll be tracking political speech, or people will be complaining about things you say in speeches, and then that'll go into the database?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the admission that we got from them on the House floor about whether certain things, if they were reported to the Department of Human Rights, would be things that would go into the database. For example, theorizing certain things about the origins of COVID, which is an important discussion that we should be having. That's something that could potentially be chilled. Another important, I think, thing that we need to consider as we're looking at this is, Gavin Newsom, a potential future, primary opponent to Governor Walz, is rolling out a similar database in the state of California. And the language on the website on California versus hate, the website, the database they're rolling out there is very clear that it includes political expressions that people perceive as biased, and that the intent of reporting those things is to chill, to stop normalizing, in the words on that website, that kind of speech. And so that should be really concerning. Frankly, it should be concerning to the Capitol Press Corps, which I think saw an example earlier this year about the ways that terms like bias or harassment or something can be weaponized against political opponents. And certainly the way that the bill was written before, I think, made very clear. What they did was sort of vagify the bill. They made it less clear, but it still has the same funding. It still has, from my appearance, the same sweep in terms of what power it gives to the Commissioner of Human Rights.
Leader David? Yes. Have you talked to Speaker Portman, or kind of what sense do you get about the next few days of session? I mean, we heard people are upset about the timing of things. I'm just wondering if you've had any sense of what that's going to look like or any input from your caucus on that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I have been in communication with Speaker Hortman. I think it's important to look at this entire session, and I know the media, the public, legislators, lobbyists have all talked about the speed at which things have gone through. They've gone incredibly fast, and that has not been the most transparent way for the people of Minnesota to be able to be involved or give input. We've heard times that in committees, there's a limit on testifying time, 2 minutes, because we have a lot of testifiers. The majority easily could extend the committee hearings and recess and come back to make sure that the public's voice is heard. We've also had times in committees that our members have not been given a full ability to ask questions and understand and vet the bills in the committee hearings. There's one incident that I'm aware of, and I do have to think that there's probably more, where we had testifiers that wanted to come in to an education committee. They were concerned about the lack of funding for a PSEO provision that normally has been accessed, and there was going to be a limit if it was a faith-based organization. Those testifiers the night before after 10 o'clock, from what I understand, they were told, I'm sorry, you can't testify in our committee tomorrow. We're just going to have your testimony written. So I believe that the public's voice has been completely shut out or squashed in this legislative session. So as far as my conversations with Speaker Hortman, they have put in a deadline. We know we were supposed to be done with this session May 22nd. The majority has decided that is going to be May 18th. And things are being rushed through. I was asked if we would be willing on the early childhood bill that I had mentioned earlier, that is coming up at 9 p.m. because it came in at 9 a.m. It needs that 12 hours. I had been asked if we would be willing to just, suspend the rules and take it up early. That is not a transparent way to do business. We have days left in this legislative session. The public deserves to hear what is being talked about, what is going to potentially become law. And when we were not given conferee positions on every conference committee, there is no way we are going to be able to suspend the rules and get things through faster. We have to have voices heard. We need a 533-page bill that came out at 2:30 a.m. is still being vetted by research. Obviously, we're doing our work as those committees are going through, and we weren't given a spot, but we were watching as much as we can. But a lot of that is done behind closed doors. We need more transparency. That's what we're looking for. And so their deadline of May 18th, if they can make that, great. But we are going to still bring up the things that are very concerning to us. Any other questions?
Why do you call it a get out of jail free card? Can't remember who called it that.
I'm going to turn that over. I have not heard that in this press conference right here. I'm sorry, yeah, it would be the changes that are going to be heard on the House floor after tonight when that comes up. Are there any other questions, though? All right, thank you for being here. We appreciate the opportunity you give us to share our concerns.